Warm welcome, you're watching To The Point. I'm Preeti Chaudhary. After a complete wipeout in 5 elections across the country, the Congress is in a think mode yet again. The G-23 is back in action. But this time around, will they do more? Then, just possibly maybe, meet for dinner and issue a press release.
The humiliating defeat in 5 state elections that included a rout in Uttar Pradesh and Punjab has triggered a churn in the Congress. The group of 23 leaders questioning the functioning of the party for the first time listed out their demand in public. A statement issued after their meeting at Ghulam Nabi Azad's residence on Wednesday calls for a collective inclusive leadership. They also urged the party to start the dialogue with like-minded parties to pose a united challenge to the BJP. The statement carried names of Ghulam Nabi Azad, Anand Sharma, Kapil Sibal, Prithviraj Chavan, Shashi Tharoor and others. Hectic meetings followed on Thursday. Former Haryana Chief Minister Bhupender Hooda met Rahul Gandhi, while Kapil Sibal lashed out against Rahul Gandhi in a newspaper interview, has stayed silent since then. Shankar Singh Waghela, a new member of the club, is the latest to hit out at the Gandhis.
प्रियंका के लिए जो होना चाहिए था सही समय पर तो मिसफायर होता है, जिसको राजनीति में नहीं आना है। राहुल गांधी के बाद में वो बहन के हिसाब से बाद में आई। सोनिया जी की इच्छा भी राहुल को पहले, बाद में प्रियंका को लाना नहीं लाना, लेकिन यूपी जैसे स्टेट में महामंत्री बनकर इनको जो अंदर डाला गया, ये पॉलिटिकल मिसफायर होता है।
The Congress has announced it will hold a brainstorming session to study the election debacle. Sonia Gandhi has also named leaders to find the cause for the stunning reverses, but G-23 is not pleased. It wants an overhaul in the functioning of the leadership. But how far will Sonia Gandhi go to accommodate them? Bureau Report, India Today.
All right, let's cut across to our panelists this evening to actually ponder whether the G-23, which is no longer, I would reckon, the G-23 because the numbers have grown from 23, somewhere about 35 is what we are given to understand. Can they actually do something other than just issue out statements? And will them doing anything be actually enough, because many of them have been considered a rather lethargic lot themselves. Let's cut across to our panelists. Sanjay Jha, political analyst, joins us, who was once with the Congress. Javed Ansari, senior journalist, and Rahul Srivastav, our national affairs editor. Rahul, you know, we'd seen this whole exercise in 2019 when, a letter was written. All of that happened with the G23 meeting. Other than just maybe a rise in numbers of G23, which is a little more than 23 right now, do you see any difference at all? All right, we seem to have lost Rahul Srivastav. We're going to try and get back to him. But I want to cut across to Sanjay Jha as well. Sanjay Jha, you know, the fact is there's a lot of, talk. You've also many times said that, you need, more voices within the Congress. You need a new president. You've peddled the name of Sachin Pilot. But, I want to ask you, what organizational changes will, say, the G23 or when any other number actually bring to the table? Because when you actually go one by one to most of them, they've been rather lethargic themselves. They've been the problem of what really signifies the Congress today.
Well, Preeti, let's be honest. The way the Congress party has been functioning over the last couple of years has been extremely unilateral, opaque, and bottom line, terribly ineffective. If the political brands work, frankly speaking, nothing succeeds like success. But the truth is, after 2 Lok Sabha routes and literally losing 40 of the 50 odd assembly elections, if the Congress party today does not accept change, and the G23 or 24, whatever, who are making some very constructive suggestions, if listening to them is a big, generosity that the party is demonstrating, well, it tells you that clearly in a party democracy is a virtual joke. And this is the time for the Congress party to actually invite criticism. Forget feedback. I would say invite criticism and tell us where we have gone wrong. This is the time for the Congress leadership to say, we are going to meet people in batches, not just the G23, not just the CWC, but what about young people? What about spokespeople? What about leaders in different parts of the country? You need to actually listen to every grassroots worker. So if there is this, even today when I hear Salman Khurshid, Ashok Gehlot, Mr. Singh Dev, and Adhir Ranjan Chaudhary, I'm like, are you guys living in a fool's paradise or what? I mean, these guys are terribly delusional. The G23, which, by the way, in my opinion, has got the minds of the entire party, cannot match the minds in the G23. And they bring not just experience, political heft, but I think great degree of intelligence and intellectual, I think, honesty that the party needs to confront today. Instead, we are having this absolutely absurd, atrocious situation where people are talking about, can we sack Kapil Sibal? Can we sack somebody else? I mean, honestly, this is making such a terrible reputation for the Congress party. And I'll tell you something, Preeti, I need to say it with enough conviction on your channel today. Somebody like me, I've come laterally into the Congress. I'm loyal to the ideology of the party. I can't believe it for myself that this is the same Congress that inspired a Nelson Mandela and a Martin Luther King Jr. I think congressmen need to look within or read their own history and stop making a fool of themselves.
All right, Javed, I'll bring you in. Before I go across back, okay, we have Rahul Srivastava back. But, Javed, I want to ask you, the fact is the Congress has already hit rock bottom. Now, why not listen to the G23, go for these organizational change that the G23, 24 or the new members that they are in it are wanting? What is the worst that could happen? Because the worst is already on display.
Well, certainly, they need to listen not just to the G23, but to the wide body of congressmen across this country. They need to listen to their bloc presidents, their CLP leaders, their PCC chiefs, their elected representatives. I mean, listen to whoever you have to listen to or you can listen to. Get feedback, make it inclusive, as wide-ranging and as inclusive as possible. And perhaps that is why belatedly some residue of wisdom has dawned and they've called a Chintan Shivar. I hope there will be free and frank elections. As far as the other eminent suggestions made by G23, I'm not really aware, because let's be. I know that Mr. Sanjay Jha has the good of Congress at heart. He may be better at this moment, but I don't know what is the great silver bullet that they have come up with, which if the Congress, if the those in part, the decision makers in the Congress, if they take it on board, it will certainly, everything will be hunky-dory. The Congress the Congress party's problems go beyond leadership. It has a huge mountain to climb, and they need to build it brick by brick. So therefore, once incorporating somebody, taking in somebody or throwing out somebody, this business of throwing out should stop, because the Congress just is not, you're not suffering from an embarrassment of riches. As it is, thousands of people have left. You should think in terms of it can do with all the help that it gets. It should think in bringing in people rather than throwing people. Open up your decision making, open up consultations, and get the best talent available. The CWC and organizational elections are happening. I hope that G23 and everybody else who fancies their chance will contest. I hope there is a serious contest for the post of presidentship, and may the best man or woman win, and there should be a free and fair election. And whatever happens thereon, whoever is elected, everybody should just accept it and move on. Because right now, Congress, there's more infighting than fighting the war machine of the BJP. Congressmen are more adept at fighting each other, pulling down each other, than in fighting the BJP. The party appears to be out of sync with the leadership, or vice versa, the leadership appears to be out of sync with the party. They need to sit down together and decide what they stand for, and then go forward from there.
Rahul Srivastava, one thing is very clear, that the fault lines within the Congress are only but deepening. We've seen that with the new numbers that added to the dinner yesterday in this particular meet. But I want to ask you, save the likes of maybe a Mr. P. Chidambaram, in the recent past, which member, which was the original G23, has actually done anything for the Congress? Because they've been the most lethargic. They might, Sanjay Jha might say that they are the best academic minds, put together. Sure, they must be, but have they used it for the betterment of the party or even going after the current government? No. Rahul, can you hear us? All right, we seem to have lost Rahul Srivastava again. He's making all these, these faces there. We are hoping he's going to just speak, but we're going to try and get him back. Javed, you wanted to answer that question. Go ahead.
Yeah. Listen, till a year ago, the G-23 and the parent Congress, they were all together. And what happened then? This is just to give you an idea of the kind of, monumental challenge that the Congress is up against.
Okay.
When they were all together, at best they got 50 plus. Earlier in 2014, they had 44 seats.
All right.
So
okay.
What are we talking about?
Right. Fair enough. Let me get Sanjay Jha to answer this, Javed, and we're hoping to make that connect again with our National Affairs Editor, Rahul Srivastava. The Sanjay Jha, the question is, I take whatever you're saying. You're correct. These guys have the experience. These guys have the minds. They are brilliant with what they do. But what is it that they have done? Even if you look in the last 5 elections, other than Mr. P. Chidambaram going down to Goa, which one of them has done anything at all? They have no skin in the game anymore.
Preeti, let me tell you, that is precisely the worry, that they have been very systematically marginalized within the party. And this is absolutely a monumental tragedy. Let's take an example of Shashi Tharoor. Tell me, when you ask of which one parliamentarian in this country has both the intellectual heft, the articulation, the ability to actually be so charismatic as a public speaker, I think across all parties they will vote for Shashi Tharoor. Ask yourself this question, Preeti, and I can do a search. How well has the Congress leadership used Shashi Tharoor through, reaching out to the urban constituency, going to IITs and IIMs, or engaging in focus groups with the young? We don't. I believe the leadership's job is to make use of your resources. This whole argument, a lot of these sycophants keep saying, I don't call them loyalists, who keep saying that Rahul Gandhi is the only one who fights against the RSS. I think that's such a whole load of absolute nonsense. I think every congressman, if he's ideologically committed, battles at his own level. Sashi's written a book on why I am a Hindu. Has Shashi Tharoor been leveraged by the party politically to kind of espouse that dialogue across India? Mm-hmm. The answer is no. And I'll give you one example. I think Javed mentioned, is there a silver bullet for sorting out some of Congress's woes? Well, there is one that I personally recommended, and I don't think the G-23 has said that's not a good idea. And that is that the Congress party should dump this one single president being the big, numero uno of the party.
Okay.
They should have 5 vice presidents. Vice President West, Vice President South.
Rahul, हमें आवाज आ रही है. Do we finally have you?
Yeah,
Rahul, doing the audio check.
I hope so.
Yeah, Sanjay, finish what you have to say.
Yeah. So one of the suggestions given is that the Congress party should have a president backed by 5 vice presidents, one for North, one for South, East and West and the Northeast. If you decentralize the party, empower other leaders, and you create a dynamic structure, the Congress can yet come back. But you can't do it if you're going to be sinking in bureaucratic cholesterol.
All right, okay. Rahul, we've asked you enough questions, now go ahead.
Preeti, the point here is that everybody seems to have a prescription for what the Congress should do or XYZ should do. The problem here is that when we talk about fissures, there are no fissures in the Congress. In fact, these fault lines are actually the lines of disarray. And that line of disarray is primarily because that in Congress, there are people who have prescriptions but have not identified the problem/problems. Congress has to identify what exactly the problem is. Now, for example, you have this set of leaders called the G-23, unhappy, wanting a change as far as the top leadership or the first family is concerned. Then there is the first family. Then there is a group of leaders who get their sustenance and livelihood in politics from the first family. Now, if you take these 3 subsets, there is a 4th one also. There are leaders who are satellites in the Congress party today, like Mr. Ashok Gehlot and others, who are regional satraps. They have virtually very little to do with what happens at the top because they are entrenched. Now, in this scenario, all the subsets, there is one common, and that is the Congress's first family, which has virtually run the party for its entire career since India gained independence.
Okay. All right. Rahul, what you need to do is, and this is the second time it's happening on the show, you need to look in and get your internet connection fixed. We've lost Rahul again, but let's quickly get in a word from both our other two panelists. Javed, you've tracked the Congress very closely for decades. I want to ask you, do you think this time it's going to be different? This open point-by-point change that the G23 or the dissenters within the Congress want, do you think for the first time there's going to be anything actual change which will be made where the organization of the Congress is concerned?
I do believe that some of the suggestions made are being taken on board. Today's developments are a pointer in that direction. Sanjay, my friend, would be able to throw more light on them, but I do believe that some ground has been covered or some common ground has been found at Mr. Huda's meeting with Rahul Gandhi this morning, and the G23 that is meeting at Mr. Azad's place as we speak is perhaps deliberating over it. I do not believe still that everything it's all doom and gloom and everything is lost as far as a rapprochement between these two groups is concerned. As far as the larger question of Congress Party's revival, it would take a very special kind of optimist to believe that G23 and all of them coming back together at 10, suddenly everything will be hunky-dory. Because Congress Party's problems are far more fundamental and much deeper than this.
Sanjay Jha, Javed talks about how some of these suggestions will be factored in, but who's going to factor them in? Because the very sheer, what the G23 or even the likes of you are going on to push is that the entire structure needs to change.
Absolutely, Preeti. Think about it, that the party doesn't have a full-time president and you have a Lok Sabha election in 2 years. How can this party take on the BJP? I mean, it's an absolutely preposterous, what I call as an asymmetrical warfare. And therefore, I think the G23 speaks not just for the 23 people. I think they're speaking for, perhaps in my opinion, the majority of the Congress supporters, and more importantly, the voters. You'll find a lot of people in the Congress today who run down the G23 do so because they believe that a certain set of people will always control the Congress no matter what. And you know what I'm trying to hint at. But the number of voters is what the Congress should worry about. The voters, the 12 crore voters today who supported us at 20% vote share in 2019 when we were completely demolished and decimated, aren't we letting them down today? And that's what the Congress leadership should think about. And I believe there are solutions. I agree.
But you want, Sanjay, I want to ask you, but the likes of you want the Congress leadership to change. You want the Gandhis to go.
I do believe that everyone has a time and you need to reinvent yourself if you're not actually delivering on your performance. This happens, by the way, in media organizations. It's happened in companies, by the way, you evaluate quarter to quarter. What are we talking about? A coach in a football team gets sacked for losing one tournament. Why should politics be such a cool ride for people, even if you're losing election after election? I mean, Javed, for God's sake, it is not anybody's personal family copyright. I'm sorry.
Javed, just 5 seconds. Do you think it's better that the Gandhis step down?
I think it will be better that whenever organizational elections take place, G23 and F23 and everybody else should contest and let the people decide. Neither the CWC nor G23, let the average Congress worker decide and let them choose. Why should Sanjay Jha or Javed Ansari nominate somebody?
No, nobody is nominating anyone. We're just asking for your opinion.
Preeti, even you can do that.
All right. Well, I'm going to stay clear of it. Appreciate you both gentlemen for joining us. Thank you there. Rahul Srivastav as well. We're going to get that connection going the next time that we have him there. A quick break. To stay with us on the other side is Rahul Kanwar.